Hey guys, today I'm going to be going over my top tips for staying inspired during music production, making sure you're getting things done and just progressing at a good pace. Huge thanks to LoopCloud for sponsoring this video, and I'm going to cover some of the free samples and free plugins that you can get from them right now. So LoopCloud, Plugin Boutique, and Producer Tech have all teamed up to provide you some free plugins and free samples to download. That includes iHeartNY Parallel Compressor, Pulsar Smasher Compressor, and Vocal Splitter. The first two are cool compression plugins, and the last one is a cool distortion and widening effect that you can not just apply in vocals, but can apply to anything you want. Also, if you sign up for the free 30-day trial of LoopCloud, you'll get this free sample pack, and also 400 hours of tutorials over at Producer Tech. Okay, so my biggest tip for staying inspired and just being creative in general is to use song nucleuses. So finding idea loops or like melody loops or chord progressions and using those as the starting point of a whole song can really help light that fire in your head and help you stay inspired. For example, in this thing that I started today, I found this guitar sample. Now, the benefit of LoopCloud is that you can have a VST link bridge. So this is actually playing inside my DAW. So if you have a look here, when I press play, it's coming through my DAW. This also syncs up with your DAW, so you can just press play from inside the DAW and it will play along. So if I have a MIDI note here at C3 for this LoopCloud instance, and then I solo it, and then I press play inside the DAW, it's going to play the sample from inside LoopCloud. Now, I can control the volume here or in the DAW, and I can also go and change this to any other sample if I want as it loops. Also, you don't even have to write the note in to do this. You can just make sure that this button is clicked, and then every time you press play inside the DAW, it's going to play. And this way you can change on the fly, and it will keep the sync going as well. So you can change on the fly as you're just playing along inside your DAW with all the other elements. This is actually one element that I really enjoyed discovering, because it means that I could just switch through loops on the fly and it would update in my DAW just like I'm using a sampler or something, but it's also keeping track of where the playhead is inside the DAW. Okay, so going back to that tip of using a song nucleus, another tip is to use samples from packs that aren't designed for your genre. So for example, if I'm trying to make drum and bass, I can use stuff from other genres or even just like, more ambient sounds to start a song. It doesn't necessarily have to be at 174 BPM. You can stretch things, you can use things out of time if they're not really got much rhythmic element to it. For this, I found a sample pack called Voyage, which is designed for chill, trip hop, and electronica. But it had some really cool kind of riffs and melody ideas that I was going through, and I really resonated with this one idea here. So this is a parallel compressor. This can really fatten up a signal. You can actually start overdriving this quite hard. You've got the spank knob here, and then you've got your parallel signal knob, and then the output. So you can drive the output up as well and start to clip the signal. And you can solo the parallel signal as well. And it's just a nice sounding New York style compressor here. So I'm going to flick the parallel compressor on and you'll hear the difference. So as you drive up the parallel signal, so then I added the Pulsar Smasher, which is an FET compressor. And I just added this to overdrive it a bit more, and I'm also doing a bit of parallel compression on this as well. Then I just added an EQ. I'm just slicing off the lows, dipping the low mids, and boosting the high mids a bit. This is just to get rid of some of that boominess and give it some more clarity. And then I added thermal. This is a new distortion plugin by Output, and there's a load of different presets you can go through. I just found one called Miracle Tone, which sounded really nice, and it started widening the guitar as well. So here's what it sounds like. So I'm going to do an A-B of before and after. I also wanted to say that I've got a Patreon page set up now, so you can go support me there if you want. And during these times in lockdown where all musicians' gigs have been cancelled and pretty much half or more of our income has just been deleted, stuff like Patreon is a very good way of supporting artists directly. And you can get rewards ranging from teasers to new music, you can get sample packs at the end of the month on the producer tier, Patreon only live streams covering one of my tracks every month, direct feedback from me, And then you have the higher tiers where you can have one-on-one tutoring with me or get me to master your music and also have me basically directly mentor you for the entire month. So I hope you go check out the tiers that are available there. And if you end up supporting me, then thank you very much. Big thank you to R34 Infinity for joining my masterclass tier. Now, looping back to the idea of using a song nucleus, you can use that to give yourself an idea to build off of. But once you've built enough elements around it, you could even then swap out that nucleus with something else that you've made if you really wanted to. Or you can just take the chord progression from an idea that you like and then just redo it with different instruments, different layering. There are no rules here. Another tip that helps me not get sidetracked too much when I'm producing is to separate your sound design sessions and your songwriting and production sessions. Unless you're really good at sound designing and can come up with a sound that you have in your head that you want to put on paper, or if you're really good at experimenting or just love letting a sound kind of direct where you want to go with the song, it can often slow your process of songwriting if you have to sit in the middle of a project and start sound designing. And it can also be demotivating if you have a certain sound in your head and you're trying to make it and it doesn't turn out exactly how you want, or it just sounds bad, and you probably will want to stop producing for the night. But if you do sound design and something cool is made, it can also spark ideas for other elements in the track. So take this advice with a pinch of salt. With that being said, I often like to try to start as simple in the sound as possible and then build up using layers of like distortion and processing. So for this sound, I've just used a saw wave with just unison of 8 times and a very small detune and then a noise layer. So I wrote the bass line underneath the guitar to feel like where it was going. I did an 8-bar progression and then I changed that for the next 8 bars and then it loops back to the first. Let's have a quick listen. So now if I throw a thermal on that, it's going to distort the bass and completely change the character. And this is what we get. And then throw a portal on that. Just some multi-band compression and EQ. We're really starting to get the idea forming here. So then I wanted to start layering in some drums. So I looked through a couple drum and bass packs and I found these tribally drums that actually fit really well. And I think they're actually free. So I was just loading up sounds inside Loop Cloud. And as you'll see, it plays inside Loop Cloud even though I'm playing in my DAW. So as you can see, this can be really helpful for just kind of surfing through different sounds and replacing them in real time. Let's do that real quick here. Let's find some drums and then go through some loops. So let's say that I end up liking this idea. What I can do is then just hit the buy file here and then download it and then drag this into the DAW straight away, just like this. And now I have it. Then obviously if I want to stretch it to the tempo I can, and then I've got it inside the DAW. So to process this main drum loop, I put on the iHeartNY parallel compressor, and then I also did an EQ sweep, which is just filtering it in as the intro progresses here. So I also realized there was a top layer version of those drums and I wanted to add them in as a wide layer to kind of fill out the space a bit more. So I used the vocal splitter to widen it out. So if we listen to the difference here, this is without anything. So now with the vocal splitter and a high pass on, this is what it will sound like. So you have this depth knob that kind of controls how deep the width is here. As you can see, you've got a speed knob here, which I'm pretty sure determines the speed of the chorusing. You've got a high pass and low pass filter. You have the drive, which is obviously the drive, and then you have the mix knob as well. It's a really quick and easy way to get some nice width and grit on some elements. So with that drum layer on top, this is what it sounds like now. Then I wanted to use some of the vocals that came with the free sample pack. So I just entered the key that I was in, so C sharp, found a bunch of C sharp vocals and just listened through. I actually really like this first vocal and ended up using it. And then I went through a few more and found some other textures that I could layer in the intro just to make it a bit more interesting.
I gave my word. I have lost myself. Yeah. Fuck you. Right? You the only one I see. 'Cause I thought you loved me.
So the two I used was the first one. We got this. And then we have this atmospheric one, which I ran through the vocal splitter again to give it some more width and just a simple high pass to get rid of any of the sub bass in it. So layered in, this is what it sounds like now. I then just searched for some other samples like noise sweep, and then just found a bunch of noise sweeps and went through and just downloaded a couple. I also went and searched for some flute samples and found this one because I had an idea of having like a nice oriental flute kind of playing towards the end. So I went in and pitch corrected a few of the notes at the start, stretched it out so it didn't sound as choppy, and then added in the iHeartNY parallel compressor, and then a nice Valhalla room reverb, which sounds like this. And then mixed into the song, it sounds like this. And then everything together with the noise samples as well, this is what the intro idea sounds like. So for me personally, writing an intro like that is really inspiring for the whole mood of the track because it helps solidify an idea in my head and what kind of theme I want to progress with the whole track. I'm going to run through some other tips for you so you can help stay inspired. So a big one is to figure out what times of day that you work best and set those times as your work time and have no other distractions. So figure out if you work better in the morning, afternoon, evening, or even late night. Knowing your time preferences really helps solidify your work hours and knowing when you should be working. Another thing for this is setting yourself goals. So set yourself a big goal for the end of the year, something like hitting a big milestone on Spotify, for example, and then detail out a plan of every single step that you need to take to kind of help push you towards that direction. So a good example that can help is making a track every 1 to 2 months. Also, personally, I like to start with the intro of a track because I find it a lot easier to make a nice, inspiring intro than just making a drop with no context before. And often if you make a drop that doesn't sound as you want, you might be uninspired or unmotivated to work on it. Whereas with an intro, you can have a really good idea of where the rest of the track is going to go. And even then, you might even make a drop that doesn't sound anything like you would have made if you just made a drop straight away. Another thing is to work on more than just one thing at a time. So I personally like to have only 3 things that I work on at the same time. And that helps kind of juggle your kind of creativity and let you not burn out on one thing too quickly. But also, as a good rule of thumb, I don't like to work on more than 3 things because then it's easy to let things slip and not finish things quick enough. And if you don't finish things quick enough, you might actually improve very quickly and end up outgrowing the production level of this thing you were working on, which then can give you a lot of work in trying to bring that production up to the same quality that you're at now. And then you might just scrap it. Also, pretty much every music producer will want to share their music with their friends and family when they've made something cool. But if you've ever shared something with someone and they haven't shared the same excitement with you, and they tell you that things need to be worked on, it can often kill your excitement and motivation on something very hard. So if you're very susceptible to that, I'd recommend holding off on showing anyone something you're working on until it's in a very, very late stage, or at least you've got a very concrete idea of what you're doing and you know that it sounds really polished. Another thing that you can do if you're feeling unmotivated to work on something is actually to start making your life easier for future projects by making presets, templates. For example, you can make a sidechaining preset, you can make a sub-bass preset that you use quite a lot. You can make a project template that opens up every time that has the same master effects that you use each time. But I also personally try to be careful with this and not use any templates that have too many things in it because it's very easy to kind of rely on crutches and have things sounding very samey. For example, if you have a send reverb that you use each time or a certain compression every time you open up your project. So it can end up making things sound kind of samey and you can fall into this kind of comfort cycle of using things that you know work very well. So continuing from that point, I think it's also good to be not scared of using previous patches that you've used in old songs in your new songs. So whether you're going to process them, use them the same way, or like really, really manipulate them, or just have them as like a small hit or something here and there as like a callback to your older music, it's a really good way of solidifying a sound for you, and also oftentimes helps invoke a feeling of nostalgia in the listener if they're used to your music. You got to be careful not to recycle things too much because you can end up just sounding like every single project of yours is the same. There's definitely a good balance between using old things and new things. I definitely recommend to use more new stuff than old stuff, but I think it's good to keep that balance in check. And on the same note, please don't be scared of using presets or loops or one-shots. Even if you're using them raw or you're processing the hell out of them, if it helps you get to the final result, that's all that really matters. Nobody's going to really care aside from maybe a handful of producers that have heard the sample before. And if you process them a lot and use them very creatively, then that's even more benefit to you because you've added your own flair to something. And my last big tip for staying inspired is produce music that you don't usually produce. So go ahead and dive into some other genres that you don't usually make. For me, like, having fun with some house or some lo-fi hip hop, for example, really, really helps keep that kind of creativity flowing and keeps me inspired. And even then, I might like something that I make, even if I don't plan on releasing it. It's just good to keep your brain exercised and keep that creativity flowing. So again, thanks to LoopCloud for sponsoring this video. There's a link below where you can get all the samples and the plugins that I mentioned today. I also want to say big thanks to Elgato for providing me this Wave 3 mic that I've been talking through the entire time. It's actually very cool because you have this mixer where you can mix in your microphone with your system volume, music, etc. It's designed for streaming, but you can also use external microphones in the mixer as well. And the benefit of this all being in software is that they can just release updates in future, for example, like VST support, etc. So for me, with the dual mic setup, this is actually very handy because then I can switch between the 2 mics that I've got very seamlessly without having to unplug anything. And I can just use this mixer to monitor and change my volumes in real time very easily. Also remember that I do private tutoring and mixdown and mastering services, so if you want to know any more about that, please email me. And you can use my code Protostar and the links below for Kilohertz and Subpack for 10 and 15% off respectively. All of this really helps me out financially, so big thanks to those of you who go the extra mile. And I'll see you guys in the next video.